Meeting to order.
Already?
Pledge of Allegiance, Councilman Richardson.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Larkey,
Here.
Councilmember White,
Here.
Councilmember Powell,
Here.
Councilmember Pryan,
Here.
Councilmember Kraft,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Lawson, here, Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
All right, no, we have a quorum. No personal appearances, no ordinances, resolution. A, motion approving resolution 2023-05.
A resolution supporting the city of Raymore in opposition to developing a landfill in Kansas City, Missouri, adjacent to the northern border of Cass County, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or comments? Go ahead.
My only comment, I've been approached and called and emailed by numerous people, especially out in our ward. Me and Perry butt up to this, close to this area that they want to go into, so helping Raymore, at least some in Grandview, and anybody else that's trying to stop this is critical to people in our area. So I hope that we all support this. And again, landfills are something that's needed in our communities, and we know that, but I think there should be a study in areas that they can go to that doesn't affect our neighborhoods that we live in.
Anybody else?
I second that. I know I've had calls also here this past week regarding it, wanting to know what our position's going to be in Belton. And I said, well, I think Tuesday we're going to take care of that, so just pay attention. So,
Well, I'm for the resolution too, but I guess my only question is, anything I read in the newspaper, and maybe I missed something, is that everybody that's in charge in Jackson County is denying this. So are we saying we don't believe them, or?
Well, the problem is they've already been down to Jeff City talking to the politicians, trying to get them on board to get it passed. So that's where it's,
Okay.
Jackson County and Kansas City has denied it, yes, but I think they know something's going on. They just don't want to come out and say it because it's an economic development deal.
And
you talk
technically,
about a lot of money, and I think that a lot of people will tell you all the time, deny things until the last minute, then it's too late. So.
Yeah.
Councilman Powell, I believe that they have come out and said that nothing has been applied for yet. I don't believe anybody's come out and publicly denied that anything is in the works. And there is a lot of activity going on. There is an attorney that's been hired who's one of the most premier, if not the premier, development attorney in the area. And there's been some potential land not actually changing hands yet, but that is, I think, tentatively spoken for this. So yeah, there's a lot of smoke here.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda items for review and discussion. A, upcoming 5-year TIP report and public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Just wanted to inform you that at the next council meeting, the February 14th meeting, we will be having the public hearing and 5-year annual TIF report to present to you. And the public hearing has been posted according to state statute.
Go ahead.
A question, is that on everyone, or is that,
It's on all 4 remaining TIFs, correct?
so is this a different one than our annual review, or is this?
Every year, just to be on the safe side, we review all 5 TIFs.
Okay, so it's nothing different than what we normally do, is what you're saying?
It's nothing different than what we normally do. We just go a little bit above and beyond because we wouldn't want to miss one. So we, instead of reporting on each one every 5 years, we do each one every year.
Okay, when you said 5 years, I'm like, oh man, we do that, I thought we did it every year, so.
We do.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead. All right. Item B, budget workshop.
We connected here, Jordan?
Jordan.
There he is.
We good? Oh, it's coming up. Is this on? Here we go. All right, thank you, folks. This is our operations budget workshop, and I have the presentation online on the screen. Hopefully the Zoom folks can see that. Also, everybody here, staff and council, has a copy of the paper version in your hands, so we'll go through this. And this is our presentation for the workshop, so this is nothing. I just want to remind everybody, nothing's final. All right, tonight's goals: we want to review priorities, understand what our current environment is. We want to have a basic overview of where our money comes from and where it potentially would be going in fiscal year 2024, and essentially discuss major changes for fiscal year 2024. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with our operations budget workshop this evening. Current challenges: we have a new finance department leadership, obviously. This is the first budget for myself, the first budget, or not first budget ever, but first Belton budget for myself, first Belton budget for our finance director, first Belton budget for our assistant finance director. So it's been a lot of work. I'd say a labor of love, but I don't know if that might be a little bit strong. But we are still learning this in depth. We have a really good handle on it now, but I just want you to understand this is the first one for us, and so that it's been a lot of extra effort to make sure we know what's going on and where things are going and where they're coming from. And then you guys, obviously, financial reporting kind of ceased to the city council in the middle of fiscal year 2022. There were no financial reports. The audit was never done for 2022. That's currently in process, so it's not like we're not doing it, but it's obviously super late. So that's just catching up on the finance side has just made it a little more difficult than it normally would be. And fiscal year 2023 was programmed with a lot of existing fund balances budgeted for the year, kind of depleting those fund balances in the rainy day funds. Now, luckily, not all that money was spent, but it was budgeted. So so when you look at the budget from 23 and then you pushed it forward to 24, at first it looked really bleak because it looked like we were running out of money, but because so much was programmed in 2023. But more was programmed in 23 than we could possibly spend, even because we don't have the staff to implement those, all that spending, and luckily. And so we're not in bad shape at this point, but we also are in a situation where we want to make sure we're being conservative and responsible. So you'll recall that as we started our budget process a few months back, we talked to the wards, got their feedback. We reached out to you individually and asked for your feedback. We came together and said, okay, let's settle on some priorities. And these were the common priorities that are, as they're related to our budget anyway. Sidewalks, obviously there's a lot of need for sidewalks in our community, both improvement and maintenance to existing sidewalks, and a lot of areas where we do not have any sidewalks. Recycling program kept coming up, or the potential for one of those. North Scott redevelopment is one of those important issues that we've obviously been discussing. And city beautification and code enforcement, that was another issue that came up quite a bit, both in wards and with the council members listing it as a priority. And of course, continued development has also been a big priority that we've all agreed on since I was hired, and probably well before that. Specifically, city manager goals, I've listed these things that a lot of them were discussed when I was hired, and they've been, they make a lot of sense. They're common sense. We want to create a better working environment to allow staff to thrive. We want to make sure that we're improving and fostering community partnerships and relations that are going well. We want to improve public communications and transparency. We want responsible financial stewardship of the taxpayer money. And we want to ensure that we have a development-friendly environment that exists here in Belton, which includes minimizing our bureaucracy as an organization. So, some budget assumptions, and some of this will be kind of, here's where we start to get into the meat of this presentation. I am asking or recommending a 7.5% COLA and a 2.5% step for a potential total staff raises for next year of 10%, and we'll talk a little bit about that. 15% increase in health insurance premiums, because that's essentially what we were given this year anyway. And I don't know that that's going to slow down unless we get some better numbers moving forward. Sales tax revenues for this year, we've averaged about 12% the last 4 years. I was a little bit conservative in estimating 10% growth for this year. I actually think normally I'd be even more conservative than that, but I think with us having 640 multifamily units coming online, and I know that the leasing on those is going really, really well. From what I know from Encore's perspective, they're going super well, and I've heard positive things about the Center 301. So we're going to see some growth in residential, in the number of people that live here, and so I wanted to take that into consideration. So I kept a pretty aggressive number at 10%, but I think that's actually fairly conservative given the trends that we've had the last few years. Costs obviously continue to increase. Everybody in here has felt it. You can't go to the grocery store, you can't go to a hardware store, you can't go anywhere and not see that costs have gone up for everything at all levels, and so that's just the reality of the world we live in, which is kind of goes back to the 7.5% and 2.5% increases for staff that we're asking for. Also, we're estimating that we're going to get a 5% increase in water from KCMO, and that would hit us in the water fund as far as an expense. And I know that Little Blue Sewer District has passed on an increase of 5.9%, and I realize that's not the entirety of all of our residents, but we do have a portion of our residents that are in that sewer district, so we do have that reality facing us. Okay. Now let's look at what our 24 overview, and here I'm not going to, and this is kind of a style thing that I don't know that we've 100% worked out. I'm not going to go line by line here. If you guys want a line by line, we can get you some spreadsheets. We can meet one-on-one or two-on-one with the ward. I'll be glad to go line by line with you guys. I'm just going to hit the highlights essentially here in this workshop, take any questions, dig into anything that you want to dig into. So the 2024 overview, general fund, resources, we believe about $31.5 million. That includes fund balance and revenues. Expenditures, $25.5 million, which would leave a cash balance of $5.9 million essentially, which is about a 25.24% fund balance, which to me, our city charter requires that we have a 15% fund balance in the general fund. Given that we rely so heavily on sales tax as a revenue source, it is going to be my recommendation at all times that we keep a higher than 15% general fund balance, because sales tax can be so cyclical and so volatile at times. Obviously, we've been in a period of commercial growth and even some residential growth recently, and so that we haven't seen that bear out. But at some point, in every community, you're going to have some ups and downs in sales tax revenues, and since we rely so heavily on that, I think it would behoove us to have a consistently higher than the minimum fund balance in our general fund to ensure that we can weather any storms that were to come through. Okay. General capital, $816,000 in resources. This does not include capital for water and wastewater, or even capital for police and fire.
So what is this account? What do you got in general capital?
It's mainly public works and other capital public works that are not streets, water or wastewater, and not fire and police. And so it's the catch-all of every other capital.
Like our buildings?
Like our buildings, for instance, we don't have very much in here. We have $319,000 in expenditures. 200 of that is a comprehensive plan. Okay, so that's stuff like that would be in that capital. Yeah, so if we were to do an overhaul of City Hall, that would be in that.
Gotcha. Okay.
So obviously that we discussed that during the budget workshop, and that's been taken out because we don't think it's fiscally prudent to do at this time. Okay. Also, yeah, so that's.
I was assuming most of that $319,000 is being done at the public works facility still?
Yeah, some of it, not necessarily. It's like I said, 200,000 of that is the comprehensive plan. I kept the comprehensive plan in there because I think that's an important planning document. It's going to have some data for us and help us understand where our housing is going and what we want to do as a community and how we want to grow and how we want that to look. And so there's literally $119,000 of little things that in the capital plan, and I'd be glad. I mean, at some point we can go through that if you'd like. I mean, it's pared down though quite a bit from what it has been in the past. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the capital expenditures when I get to police and fire and whatnot. So this is just the overview. Streets, obviously you can see we've got a healthy streets fund right now. Our wastewater fund is healthy right now. Our water fund is at 28.15% this year, but that's a little misleading. Assuming that we get the 5% increase from KCMO, which I believe we are likely to get, then we have $15.6 million in expenditures in the water account, and we're only going to have about $12.5 million in revenues in the water account, so that's not a sustainable model long term. Just want you to understand that and know what that is. And then there's the golf fund, which is fairly consistent. So when I talk about general fund revenues, just so make sure everybody knows what we're doing and we're speaking the same language. General fund revenues include done with sales tax. There's a small portion that's property tax, and that property tax kind of stays pretty consistent year over year. We get a small increase, but I believe it's the Hancock Amendment restricts how much we can go up in the property tax. So sales tax is where we get the majority of our growth. Utilities and franchise fees, intergovernmental. So those are things like the GEMT grant and any MARC grants that we might get. Any other grants that we would get would be an intergovernmental usually. Service fees and charges. These are things such as ambulance fees. We offer fire protection for certain areas, court fines, SRO partnership. The money we get to help us fund that is included in service fees and charges. And then overhead allocations. Of course, you guys know overhead allocations and billings come from essentially our funds, our proprietary funds, water, wastewater, those types of things. Any overhead allocations, those things add up to equate what our general fund revenues are, okay? Just to give you an idea how sales taxes are going and how revenues have been going, this is our general city sales tax. Our 22 actual was $4.68 million. Our 23 projected is 5.593. In fact, our 23 actual, without 2 months left, I believe was about $4.8-ish million. So seeing some strong growth there. A lot of that's Chewy, so just be aware of that. And then FY24, we're budgeting for $5.9 million. Okay. Capital, when I say capital, this is general fund capital, and then of course it also includes public safety sales tax capital, going essentially from $4.2 million budgeted in 23 to $1.3 million in 24. The comprehensive plan I mentioned is $200,000 of that, and then the other four that have the red asterisk, animal control, HVAC systems for PD and fire, and for the communications area at PD, an ambulance remount, the 2 police SUVs, and then power stretcher and load system. That's the majority of that money that we have still in the capital requests that are not supported by proprietary funds. General fund expenditures. And here's where we're going to go a little bit through the general fund and go through section by section of some of the major highlights of what's going on right now. Services and supplies are steady in legislative events. Obviously, we had the 150th celebration in 2023, and that was, we had a line item budgeted in there to support that. That number comes down quite a bit in FY 2024, unless, and this is not included so far, but unless we decided that we wanted to allocate some money to help support the Community Days reboot, which I don't know that's actually going to be called Community Days, but I think council is aware that the Main Street and Chamber have teamed up and are trying to capitalize on the momentum of the 150th celebration and do an event downtown, which would be at the end of June, beginning of July. And I think it behoove the city to support that in some way, shape, or form. And I think that they're going to ask us to support it financially in some way, shape, or form. It won't be as big of an ask as what the 150th celebration is, but we might want to consider putting a little money in there. It's up to you guys, but I would recommend we put a little money in there if we think that that's something worth supporting year over year. HPO training, Belton Advantage is what we call our HPO. It's our high-performing organization. We sent a few of our department heads to training this year, just recently. They actually went through the training earlier this month. It aligns heavily with my philosophies on how an organization should be run and how we empower our employees and how we ensure that we get leadership at all levels, from the front line all the way through our management. And we can do a training on site for a fraction of the cost of what it takes to send these people to that training every year. We could get 30 people essentially for about $13,000, and so I've included that in there as a potential line item as well. There's the normal Y Highway Marketplace TIF transfer. There is no transfer to General Capital Fund from legislature as of right now, as the way the budget sits. I'm not saying we couldn't be, I'm just telling you that's how it sits. And then there's the regular golf fund transfer that we usually have in legislative. So those are the major changes from year over year that you can expect to see. Anybody want any questions on any of that? Anybody want to talk about the?
Questions, anybody?
I'd love to get.
Well, anything up to now.
We can do anything at this point up to now, or I mean.
Got a question?
Well,
Yeah.
Well, I brought along the last budget. I'm
Sure.
not defending it, but even though I voted for it. But I was questioning your very first slide where you said that the last budget was designed to get rid of all the rainy day and everything, but yet that budget had a 15% carryover. At least that's what it showed on paper. Now, maybe we spent more than that. I don't know. But what happened such that you think that we didn't have 15% left, or are not going to have 15% left in 2 months?
Well, we're going to have 25% based on the current budget now. I'm just saying that what was budgeted would spend down a lot of the resources that we did have, because there was more than the 15% essentially sitting within our budget, is what I'm saying.
Okay, so we weren't going down to zero. We were coming close to the 15%.
For this year, yes, but it also started a trend of spending down reserve balances to where the revenues did not match the expenditures. And so if we continued that trend based on the 23 fiscal year budget, that would, and
Sure,
if we'd spent all that money and continued that trend, we would have been stuck at about break even for 24. Let's put it
Okay, I
that way.
see. Thank you.
There would be no more fund balance at all. That's what I meant. Yeah, it wasn't irresponsibly done. I was just saying that it set in motion a precedent that would have left us in bad shape in 24 had we spent everything that was programmed.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And I guess the question I'm asking now, before we move on, is I'd love to hear if there's any support for us to support an event.
Absolutely. I think the city council have always supported something in these events. It might have been security, trash, bathrooms, stuff like that. I mean, we went a little bit above and beyond last year, it was the mayor's party, so I mean, we did support it more, but,
Still a good party.
but yeah, I think, definitely I would be supportive of it.
Okay.
I just had a question that, well, historically, BCPI ran help with community days after the base left, and it was at Markey Park most recently, and then the park took it over, and it was at Memorial Park. Now I think you said that it's moving again.
No, they're different things.
It wouldn't be
at this
community
point.
days; it'd be something
Correct.
else. So
And-
community days would go away.
Community days went away. The parks picked up their own event called, I believe, Summerfest, which they do with the park, and it's a separate entity from what community days used to be. It's just kind of in its place, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
And this would not, I don't believe it would be in conjunction with parks, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have to be. I don't think that's been 100% decided yet, but I just think that this is a downtown event. So when I say community days, that's probably a misnomer because it doesn't have anything to do with Markey Park, and it doesn't have, it's literally an event that would take place downtown with a name to be decided that's kind of modeled after part of what happened at the 150th anniversary celebration.
It's
So
actually being taken over by the downtown Main Street merchants.
Main Street
That's why.
is going to be running this, and I know that the folks that helped plan the 150th would be involved in the planning of this event. And the idea is to hopefully create a yearly event, an annual event, that can drive traffic downtown and have success like the 150th had to bring people into our community.
So similar to, also to Fall Festival, which is a annual thing too, right, I guess, because it's downtown too.
Right.
But we could invite parks.
I don't know, there's no reason to exclude them necessarily unless it just doesn't work out. I mean, that's,
Parks actually was invited.
Oh, for this, for the new thing?
Mm-hmm.
They said,
there's a lot there. I don't think we should get into that because I mean, that's a conversation between the event planners and parks. I think that we should just focus on what, I mean, I believe we should support it. I think that I have already pledged that we would support it from, in kind at least, with you know, the personnel that are needed to help, you know, like fire and PD and public works to ensure that we can pull it off. I'm guessing they're going to ask for a financial commitment as well, and I think that we should, right now, I don't know that we should give them the same amount we gave for 150th because this is a different type of celebration, but I think we should consider an amount because there's going to be costs there. I don't know, $20,000, $30,000 maybe, something in there.
us to say yes.
Yeah, this is a workshop, so I want to hear I want some direction.
You
so I
know,
can
we
add
say
that.
25,000 just to be
Okay,
in the middle.
fair enough.
I would say, Joe, that in the past, I've not been accustomed to having money for such things. In the past city council days, we had no money, and the Parks Board had no money. So it's nice. This year, it looks like we have money. It's easy to support when you have money, so, sure.
Yeah, I'll just say generally support the idea of community programming and supporting that how we can. I feel like we've kind of already gotten in the weeds a little bit on this, and at the risk of getting further in the weeds, I just want to call to attention that a lot of this programming and community events are often planned over holiday weekends, and that's a trend I would like to see kind of change back because that interferes with staff, park staff, everybody's time to celebrate with their own folks. So we are in the weeds on this. We don't need to straighten this out right now, but I think generally support for programming is popular with the council.
I invited us to the weeds because I want to just make sure that if they're needing support, and since we're in the budget process, that we're preparing to do that now, so that way, if the ask is made, we're ready for that.
Sure.
Angela, you got a question?
I was just going to say that I've been hearing for years how much everyone missed community days, and everyone I heard from after the 150th begged me for another every year community days type situation like we did with the 150th. That is the first thing out of everyone's mouth as soon as we had that celebration. I would absolutely support letting this group do this and giving them a donation to be able to make the event amazing every year for our citizens.
I'm for the one, going off what the 150th did for the community. I think it was amazing, and to keep that going, I think would be great for the community.
Well, and I talked to some of the people involved in this, and they liked it to be similar to that, but it's not going to be 5 days. It's not going to be as big as, they like to have some big events or big acts that come and draw people downtown, don't get me wrong, but it's probably not going to be the same as the 150th.
Yeah, I think that from the preliminary conversations, we're talking 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
So, and June 30th, I think, would be the first of that day. It's like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday type of thing, or Friday, Saturday thing, depending on how that ends up working out.
I support.
All right, I think I've got some support here, so I think I'll
We're all good,
I'll
yeah?
add a little bit of money into that line items to help support that. I know that the folks planning that would rest a little easier knowing that we've got a little bit of, that we're willing to support that. All right, anything else legislative before I move forward? All right. Fire, in the fire budget, we've budgeted to add 3 firefighters / paramedics to the budget. That was an ask made by the fire department, or by the fire chief. Increased training budget a little bit. Vehicle maintenance is obviously up slightly, and you can understand why that is. And then contractual is up a little bit as well. So you're going to see that contractual is up almost across the board. Everybody that we contract with is obviously seeing the increase in their expenses, and so they're passing along to us almost for every department. Yes.
My question, I guess, Chief Sapp, I know over the last couple of years, we've been adding some firefighters, and I think one of our goals was to, when we're fully staffed now, so now vacations and all that, would adding 3 people give us the availability to have 4 ambulances going at one time if everybody's there?
Well, currently, if everybody's here, we could run 4. The goal is to try to run a third ambulance 100% of the time. Even with the additions that we made, with the fluctuations in staffing we've had this year and the need for paramedics, we probably still only ran the third ambulance about 20% of the time.
Okay.
So hopefully adding this other one, what we're gearing ourselves toward is adding 1 to 2 more so that we can increase our minimum staffing, because right now, if we go to minimum staffing, it only allows for 2 ambulances. But in order to increase that, we have to have enough room to allow people time off for vacations and trainings and different things like that.
Okay.
So,
I just know over the last 3 or 4 years, our goal was to get to where we can hopefully run 4 ambulances if we're fully staffed, no vacations and that kind of stuff. So just wanted to see where we're at by adding 3 people.
Any other feedback on fire? All right, police. Programming increased $127,000, and I believe that is fallout from the malware attack that we had. Just ensuring that we have everything in place to ensure that doesn't happen again. Increased training budget by about $25,000. Vehicle maintenance obviously is up slightly. CBA is not done yet, but we're close, and we're asking for this, and we're trying to settle on the same, I think, that what I've asked for the rest of staff here, which is 7.5% COLA, 2.5% step. There's been an extra animal control part-time position added to the budget. Obviously, there's been a lot of public feedback on that front. And then emergency management, minor equipment up about $11,000. Yes, Councilman White.
What's the minor equipment upgrade?
Emergency management, $11,000. Scott, you know that offhand?
We're looking at upgrading our system in regards to, we just received a grant to add a new storm siren. The maintenance and care of our storm siren system is a constant event that we have to keep current.
So that's this, it's not necessarily.
Microphone.
The storm system is more this, not necessarily new equipment.
Yes, yes.
And the extra animal control, that was in last year's, or this current budget, was just a carryover because we didn't get around to doing it?
Yeah, it was never added yet.
Okay.
I don't believe they fulfilled that. So yes, it's ensuring that we still have that,
Great.
It might have been requested, but probably never approved.
probably.
Speaking of animals, do we have one yet?
No, we don't. If we had purchased an animal during this last period, that animal would have been ineffective with the new marijuana laws. And so we're waiting for a generation of dogs to be born that are not exposed to marijuana. Because if they're exposed to marijuana and they hit on cocaine, the law is throwing those cases out. And so that's one consideration and why we did not buy a canine. The other one is that we are 9 officers down. We have 3 in the academy. We have unfilled positions. We're out recruited by other agencies, but this reset in regards to pay across the board will make us more competitive, and we'll be able to recruit better with agencies. So that is a consideration under this year's budget.
So I guess I'm going to ask you a dumb question. I noticed that Georgia allows cops to be 19 years of age. I guess I never knew that. The state of Missouri requires them to be 21 before they're sworn in?
Yes. They can start the academy at 20, but by graduation, they have to be 21. There's also some agencies across the United States. Utah considered making it people that are in the country and undocumented. It would be a pathway to citizenship, and so there's a lot of different ways that other states are trying to recruit police officers, but it's down across the nation.
Well, I know you've done good at taking jailers, making them police officers, so I don't know if that's something we can market with our school district, trying to get kids that are interested in law enforcement to come be jailers and move into that next level.
Yeah, that is the success of getting police officers is getting jailers because they can be 18. and we can have them for a period of time. They can find out about the law enforcement. We get to see them work. There's many examples of those officers that have, of those jailers becoming officers, and we are tied to the Cass Career Center for that. And part of our recruiting efforts is going to be trying to tap into those local resources like that.
Thank you, Chief.
Anything else on police before we move forward?
I had a question.
Yes.
The part-time animal control officer, will that expand the normal business hours for animal control? And is there any chance in the budget that we could get a full-time?
I think our approach was to get the part-time, expand our hours, especially on the weekend, but also explore the possibility of turning it into a full-time position at sometime in the near future. And so we wanted to test that. The problem is you know, with these, the adjustments in salary, I have no doubt that we'll have some interest in regards to that position because it pays a lot less than a police officer.
Thank you.
Sounds good. All right, this next slide, I just wanted to give you guys, for your reference, the public safety sales tax FY24, we've got estimated revenue of $3.263 million and we're allocating about 3.131. And you're going to find that the public safety sales tax numbers don't 100% correspond with the general use sales tax because we don't essentially take incentives off of the public safety sales tax monies. So. Clerk and senior center, I put these together because they're both under the same individual department head. Clerk's budget is pretty minimal, adding a little bit for contractual. I mentioned that all of our contractual folks are passing along increased expenses. Also adding some more training budget in there, a couple $1,000s. I thought that was a reasonable ask. I'm the type of city manager that's going to generally recommend is more training rather than less, to be perfectly honest. I want us to invest in our staff to make sure that the best staff available.
One of the things, talking to the lady that ran, whatever that terminology is,
Senior center.
I think her budget that we give her for supplies and all kinds of stuff is very low, and I'm trying to figure out how we can raise that. I mean, Andrea, I know you run that. She get like $2,500 a year for supplies?
No, we get some money from Mark for
but
some
that's
of
for
that
rent
budget.
and her salary. I'm talking about actually supplies for the activities that she puts on and stuff like that. I just talking to her when I sponsor some stuff over there, she was, you know, she would say if we did budget again, we'd like to get some money put in there. And she's not going to be there next year, so she's not going to benefit.
Right.
But I think the residents that do go to the senior center would definitely benefit if we gave them more money to operate.
Well, just
I mean, we're talking maybe $5,000. We're not talking about a lot of money here.
if that's what y'all want to do, that's I'm not gonna. I mean, that's fine. The 2,500 is not 100% accurate. I believe we give the senior center about $60,000 of general fund money, and above and beyond what Mark gives them. So, for all types of expenses. So there's more money than the 2,500. But if we wanted to give them an extra few $1,000s for programming, for supplies or something for that they could do their own programming, I don't think that's a major hit to us. And I mean, I'm fine with that if you guys think that's where we need to go.
Yeah, their event budget is like $200 a year.
Yeah,
I think that's what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Okay.
And I'd corresponded with Andrea about that back in October, but 2,500 to 4,000, I don't know. That's kind of the range we had
It was
talked
only
about.
300?
It was 200 for events.
The event
So not
budget.
supplies, but events. And then we had talked about increasing that, so
That's
doubling down on that.
fair enough. I'll make sure there's some money in there. Then I'll make sure there's a couple $1,000 in there if you'd like. Yeah, absolutely.
I have to start going.
Got that note. Senior center also, we've looked at, in this budget, you'll see there's a part-time employee for $20,000. we're asking for a part-time employee there because right now we have one full-time employee. We don't, and when that full-time employee is, first of all, that full-time employee is spending the majority of their time busy with the events, which is good, but they could definitely use some help with a lot of the events and a lot of the programming that they do from day to day. And when they're out of town, that creates a huge hardship on staff to keep that thing open, keep the senior center open. So the ask is that we add a part-timer. $20,000 is what is a placeholder. I'm not sure that it would take the full $20,000, but that's the conversation if you guys are open to it. I think it's a popular service that we provide.
I know they relied on a lot of volunteers too over there, so
They
I mean,
have.
it's just,
And that volunteer thing is kind of funky because, I mean, that's not guaranteed for us to always have it. And I think that there's some stipulations with some of those volunteer positions that force them to essentially leave at a certain point after volunteering for so long. So if you guys are okay with that, we'll move on. Administration, I really want to hear your feedback on this because there's some different things in here than what we've done in the past. Obviously, adding the director level salary, it was budgeted for a professional for last year. We went ahead and bumped that up to a director position. We hired a director. She's doing outstanding work. I think everybody in the staff that's worked with her, I've heard nothing but rave reviews about having an HR department now, and I think it's largely a reflection on the director, but it also points to the need that we had before we had this department. I'm proposing that we potentially add a second staff member. There's actually that much there, and I'll be glad to go through this with each of you, and we can talk about all the things that HR does or would do with an extra staff person. There's things that they would not do without. $50,000 for programs and compliance assurance and culture building, essentially month to month to have things that our staff can do or participate in, or things, there's lots of things that would fit into this as well. So we're trying to actually make this a department. I'm not going to keep coming to you every year and saying we need to add more staff to HR. I think that 2 is probably as much as we would need for quite a while unless we grew quite a bit. But I think a second person would be a prudent move for us to make. But again, I'm open to that discussion.
only took us 150 years to get a HR person, right? So,
I think at one point we had an assistant city manager who handled HR, so I think that was kind of one of those things that is one of their deals. But now, in general, I put assistant city manager with a question mark. I did not budget for an assistant city manager in this budget. I'm not asking for a standalone assistant city manager. I'm asking if you guys think it'd be prudent for us to potentially add that as a responsibility to someone who's a department head maybe, and add a little bit of salary there. I don't think it's a dire need yet, but at some point it will be. We've got a lot of things rolling. A lot of the programs that we're trying to implement are going. The HR is helping with a lot of that, so it's not like I said, not a dire need, but at some point it will increase our capacity to have someone else who can manage projects essentially that are going throughout the community. So.
Joe, you are right, Joe. In the past, the assistant city manager did the HR duties, whatever that was at the time. But
sure. Like I said, I'm not asking for a standalone right at this point. It'd be someone who's probably already on staff who we might bump up, and they would then rely on their staff to pick up some of their slack in the leadership side. They'd still oversee the department, but they pick up they'd kind of roll downhill a little bit, but they'd also pick up some responsibilities that would be administrative. Just a thought. Part-time custodian maintenance. When I got here, we were struggling with and we're still struggling, to be perfectly frank, with our upkeep of the 2 buildings, City Hall and City Hall Annex specifically. I know Public Works also hires someone to go clean, and I know all the other facilities have their own that they handle. I ended up hiring a service that comes in twice a week just to clean our bathrooms, take out some trash, and do some very basic cleaning. It's not really keeping up with what's necessary or needed, and I think that our staff notices that. And it's going to cost us about $26,000 next year to do that if we keep it at that pace.
How much?
About $26,000. That's at twice a week for 90 minutes a day. Plus, I think Public Works does it once a week for about 60 minutes. And so, and that was for the cheapest option available, just to let you know. We put it out for bid. We did an actual RFP, put it out for bid for these services. That was the very cheapest option. And I think I wouldn't say we're ecstatic about the way it's being upkept. And I don't necessarily blame the company. I think that we're only giving them a certain amount of time, and they're doing what they can in that amount of time. If we hired a part-time custodian maintenance person, it'd probably be less than $20,000, and they could potentially handle City Hall Annex, and Public Works. They'd be available for 20 hours worth of work. That would include some basic maintenance of things, and I think that would increase the cleanliness in our buildings, and just I think that our staff would very much welcome something like that. So that's why I have it in there. And I've already found a way to pay for it, since we're already paying someone $26,000 on it. And then the other conceptual thing that I've bringing to you guys is, right now we have a person who's in economic development and who handles communications. And I think originally was created to handle both, kind of to split it. I think the amount of communications that we have is kind of taken over the majority of that position. And there's a lot more communications I think we should be having as a city, to be perfectly frank, to increase our transparency with the public, to make sure that they know exactly what's going on with the city. I think it'd be that I've seen a lot of cities that are our size and smaller have a full team of communications folks, 2-3 people, not necessarily here, but throughout the country. And I think one person would behoove us to go ahead and increase our communications with the public. And again, hopefully we can increase our transparency there. We can show them what we're doing, what services we provide, where the tax dollars are going. And then economic development could get that person back. They would not be a communications person anymore. And essentially would assist us in more recruitment and economic development. Yes, Allison.
Have we concluded our contract with Sturgis Word?
Yes, we no longer have that contract.
Well, that was like $45,000, right?
Yeah, something like, not at the end it wasn't. I don't know what it was to start, but at the end it wasn't.
Okay, thank you.
But we've taken a lot of we've taken all those communications things in-house, essentially, without an added person. Partially because I have a background in communications, so I thought, well, if emergency communications need to come up, I think we'll be covered fine. But as far as day-to-day communications, I think that there's a lot more we can do there.
Oh, I'd be for it. I think that's something that people ask me a lot is, how do we know what's going on? And you ask me, but I only know 1/8 of it or so.
Yeah, and so we utilize some communications methods now. Obviously, we have a professional. We would look at expanding our offerings and how we communicate. I mean, right now we're limited to Facebook posts and internet.
Well, I get that all the
posts.
time. People are like, well, you put everything on Facebook. What other people aren't on Facebook? I said, well, you can sign up for an email.
Right.
I said, if something's critical, we put it in a mailer with our water bills. I said, we try to communicate 3 or 4 different ways. I can't force you to go sign up for all this stuff.
I'm not saying
I can't call you either, so.
I think we're trying, and I don't think we're doing a poor job necessarily. No. I think that I'm just trying to, I think that if we improve this and actually make it a strength of our organization, that the public would benefit from that.
And I support it.
Well, and I think we got to get back to where your original comment was about being transparent and making people know that the information we're giving them is true, and they're going to start believing what we're saying.
Yeah. Fair enough. Any other comments or questions on administration?
I have some other thoughts too, but
Sure.
We can deal with that at another time.
Up to you. I'd rather hammer it out here or in a one-on-one rather than having to do it.
It'd be in the same dollar amount, so it's not,
Fair enough.
some different thoughts on it.
Cool. All right, then let's move on. Planning and inspection our budgets there are pretty, obviously you're seeing an increase in contractual, like I mentioned, on the inspection side. We're actually getting a savings in contractual under planning because we were contracting a lot of those services out when we didn't have a full staff. Now we have our full staff, we no longer need to go out and contract for some of those services. So that's actually going to benefit us on this side. The big thing you're going to see in planning and inspection is a difference in salary and benefits based on previous years because we weren't fully staffed and now we are. Yes, sir.
One of the things we talked about earlier this year, and I don't know if Matt ever got thrown into this, I'll bring it up during budget. We had talked about adding maybe somebody or adding responsibility onto someone that's already there about actually taking the inspections instead of it going to a recording. One of the things that I've heard from multiple people is you call in and you never know what's going on. So if you don't have people that deal with Belton all the time, And our goal, and I guess our hope is that we build a lot more in the near future than, so we need that person. But that's just some of the comments come back. I lived it also myself. It's like you call in and then you just feel like you're in this black hole, and then no one ever calls you. You don't know what to do, and you're like going, okay. So I just think if you had someone that you can actually communicate with, that would be something I would look into if we can do that.
That's a fair comment. I think that organizationally, it's a priority to me that if someone's calling and asking for information, that we're making sure that we're getting back to them somehow. And
But if they gotta be there for an inspection, and it's like, do you want them sitting there for 4 hours waiting for someone to show up because they're already doing other inspections? I mean, it'd be nice to have, like, even if you give them a time warner timeline and it said, we'll be there between 2 and 4, at least they know that.
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's,
they don't have to be there exactly at 3:30, but if you say, hey, we can be there, right now, we think we could be there between 2 and 4, and we'll get you in our calendar, so.
I think we should absolutely be willing to look at that, the way we're handling that, and if it involves more staff, then maybe we can look into that. Or if it's just an operational change that we need to make. I mentioned in there that earlier on in this presentation that, cutting down on the bureaucracy is an important thing for our development future. And so that, I think that's one of those things.
Well, I
is
think
waiting
one
on
of the
people.
things, and none of you guys were here, so, I mean, it's not you, it's just builders are say Belton wasn't friendly. It's too difficult to deal business with Belton, and having a friendly voice answer the phone like, hey, inspections, oh, I need to get an inspection done, and like, okay, we can plug you in today at, 3 o'clock. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely willing to look at that operation and see if we can go to a model that's more.
But I'm just trying to figure out how we can get builders back into our fold, that we can get more than 2 people that want to build in our community.
Yeah. I think we've talked offline, and it's something that we can make a priority here early this year is bringing in some builders and developers from the area and having a bit of like a, just come together. What are our issues that you've noticed working with us in the past? What can we work on? What have you seen other cities do that they do well that you'd like to see us do? What are the problems and barriers to you guys working with us as a city, and making sure that we can identify those?
I mean, I got to rely on you guys too. I mean,
Sure.
Matt came from Blue Springs, you came from Atchison, Greg came from Raymore, Lee Summit. I mean, you guys come from other communities that, what did they do that builders were doing business with them?
Sure.
I mean, we're doing something wrong that we don't get these people coming to us, and that's where we got to change it.
I think part of it is somewhat of a reputation thing, for whatever reason. I'm not even placing blame anywhere, but
But if Matt thinks that what we're doing today, we don't have the staff to answer those calls in the future, I just want to make sure we put something in the budget if we need a new person for that to make, I mean.
yeah, you definitely, your comment and suggestion is definitely, I mean, to me, on point. That's fine.
That's just my thoughts. You got 8 other people that can talk about it, but.
No, I think being development friendly is obviously a priority. I put it on the list of things that we wanted to do. I think you guys have identified that as a list as a priority for us. Anything else before we move on? Nope. I wanted to list some departments that have very few changes. Essentially, you're just going to see the only changes there are the salaries and benefits assumptions that we have pushed through. That's finance, IT, city attorney, municipal court. So I mean, I'm not going to go into depth on those because they're essentially same year over year, other than what those increases would be. Public Works. The main Public Works budget, the big difference is salaries and benefits again. In the garage, you're going to see some increases if you look at the line items. I realize you guys don't have all the line items in front of you, and that's probably a little frustrating looking at this from this perspective, but parts and equipment costs are going up, so that's one area that we're going to increase a little, because we have to make sure everything's being taken care of in the garage for our fleet.
We talk about Public Works, and I don't think, they have a lot of projects going on over the next 3 years, and we know that between the streets, the stormwater, and now the water lines being replaced. And do we, I mean, you don't have an assistant. We always used to have an assistant Public Works director, and I don't think we have one anymore, do we? I mean, I just don't know if that's something, I mean, that we need yet. I mean, I would probably entertain something like that just because of all the different projects going on. I don't, I don't want to wear people out because they're,
Sure.
just my thoughts again.
Yeah, it's a possibility, for us to consider. I think that Greg has done a great job, and the staff we have there has done a great job of ensuring that.
I'm not
they're-
saying
they're-
that they haven't, I'm just saying that when the water lines start being replaced, when we're still doing stormwater, and then he still wants to go out and get another bond issue done for more streets after this one's done, so,
Sure.
I mean, you could have all three of those things running at the same time, and I think we might need to look at, maybe not this budget cycle, but next budget cycle, looking for that assistant, public works director to help out with some of that load.
Yep, they are definitely an active.
And he didn't even pay me to say any of this, by the way, so.
Yep, it definitely has the most moving pieces of probably any department in our.
All the stuff that we've thrown over the last, and we're getting ready to throw, I just think that's a lot of stuff to take on, and I think
Sure.
he needs to be over here, and I think we gotta have someone helping him follow all that stuff, so.
I think they're working, I think part of the plan that they've got in there is some internal development of folks to ensure that we have that leadership at all levels, to ensure that our projects are getting done well and in an organized fashion. Not that I'm saying we don't need an assistant at some point, but that's how they're handling
He
it
wants to take
currently.
vacation too, and I mean, he has that
don't let him do
engineer,
that.
I think, that you kinda rely on a lot for that kind of stuff, but yeah, I just look at what we're doing in the next 2 to 3 years, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, whoa.
Well,
And I don't know if we can absorb that salary inside of some of these bond issues just to pay for that person out of those.
Well, we'll get to this. I'm not going to give this away I don't want to, I don't want to give away the ending to this essentially, but I do want us to look at how we're budgeting and how we have things structured in general, and that's part of the conversation as we get toward the end. So. Non-general fund budget, the major non-general fund budgets, we're talking streets, water, wastewater, golf, and economic development. We'll start with economic development, which is essentially, part of that is the hotel motel tax. Those revenues have been steady. They haven't really been growing very much, but they also haven't gone the other direction, so it's been pretty consistent, to be perfectly frank. Obviously, one of the reasons we started a tourism council is because we'd like to try to find ways to help that get a kickstart, right, and get a boost. And so, other than salary benefits, there's one major expense difference year over year, and that's in contractual, and it's bigger than a normal increase in contractual because because we would like to add a software called Placer AI. I know, and we'll bring this to you again. It's pretty neat software in terms of the fact that it's going to allow us to identify who's coming into our community and who's going where. It uses cell phone technology to track where people are going. Like, for instance, it could tell us if a business is struggling, like if there's a chain, it can tell us how it compares to traffic. That individual business in our community compares to the other businesses that are in that chain in other communities, as far as traffic counts, as far as people going in and out based on their cell phones. And so it's pretty impressive technology, and it's kind of scary, yeah, but it could be a very powerful tool when it comes to recruitment, because we'll know how many people are going where for what, essentially. So. Streets, budgeting for a couple major promotions and salaries, and it's funny that you talked about, Councilmember Clark, the whole public works issue. As far as leadership is concerned, I know that Greg is interested in training and potentially promoting down the line some folks in public works, and he split that up in streets, water, and wastewater essentially, to try and get some of those salaries into higher positions essentially, which would kind of accomplish what you're looking for, which is increased capacity at the administrative leadership level for us to take on the projects we need to take on. And then contractual going up 86,000, obviously that seems like a big number compared to others, but they do a lot more contracts than some of the other.
I guess my question is, don't we already have like a director of streets, a director of public, or of wastewater, and a director of
We've got some superintendents. Go ahead, Greg.
So I do have some vacancies in those since when Don left.
Okay.
And we also have some people who are getting certifications and degrees. And so we're trying to move them up so we don't lose them.
Right.
And so some of them, we're going to add some, change it from one level to the next level up. Because in the back of the budget book, it lists exactly how many people in every level I can have. So some of it is switching how many in a level I can have and increasing the number so I can promote some people up and have additional administrative people and reward the people for their hard work, getting degrees, getting licenses, and so we can have retention of our employees.
Okay. I just kind of, when I see that we're going to do major promotions, I'm thinking of like, I know you never kind of really replaced Don's position. It got absorbed into another person's job. But yeah, I thought we had someone running the sewer plant that I would call the director of the sewer plant, but I don't know what his
He's a
fancy
plant
title is.
operator.
Yeah, but, okay.
Water, we've got, again, the same thing, that split up that I was just talking about with streets for the promotions in Public Works. Pump station maintenance is going up, so we've got that going up $75,000. That's some necessary maintenance on our pump stations. Contractual again. You're gonna see in these two, in the capital outlay, for water and wastewater, we've got, Central Square upgrade. In the past, you guys had approved a contract with Tyler Technologies to do an encode upgrade, essentially, of all the softwares and the management softwares. And it's largely on the financial side, but it also branches out to the other areas of our organization. And and this will be something we'll talk about during executive session, because there's some contractual and legal stuff we need to consider on this. But I don't want to give it away, but that's sitting in there. That's part of that conversation. Water main replacement program, we have $5.2 million in there, but that's of course would be covered by, bonds, assuming we can go out and put those out. Wastewater, again, same thing with the salaries, contractual up 52. Greg's added $600,000 to capital outlay for the I&I program, which is sorely needed, I think he would tell you. We need to do some serious I&I work to ensure that our system's not leaking too much. Wastewater treatment plant improvements, $1.25 million in capital outlay. Central Square again is in there, and then the emergency generator, which was originally budgeted for 23. That money's not gone anywhere, so we just pushed it forward to 24. So, moving on to golf. Revenues continue to be pretty strong. We're talking about $1.2 million is what we're projecting for fiscal year 23. Actually, it's already over $1.2 million for fiscal 23, but if you recall, since our year starts in April, we don't anticipate a heck of a lot more revenue in golf between now and the end of March, just because there aren't that many golfers going out. I'm not saying there aren't any, but there aren't that many going out from February and when it's really cold. Food and beverage costs going up, obviously, that makes sense. Merchandise costs going up, that makes sense. Also accounting for that in the revenue side too, so it's not just the expense. But if you were to look at the line items, you'll notice those are higher. And then he's also got a capital project in there for $100,000 for asphalt repaving around the clubhouse. It may not use the entire $100,000. He hasn't officially planned that out yet, and that'll be again contingent on available money. But that's what's in there right now in the budget.
I thought we were supposed to do an overlay this year on the parking lot.
It's coming. It'll be spring. It's, obviously the asphalt plants are pretty well shut down right now, so, but that is still slated, so whether that money gets carried over, but it's already budgeted in the FY23 budget.
All right.
There you go, and that's golf. Parks and Rec, and this is going to be short and sweet for obvious reasons. I'm just going to give you a list of the line items, of the lines. Parks revenues, we've got taxes and other revenues. They have interfund transfers, the aquatic center, outdoor water park, High Blue, and special events. That's how they generate their revenues, and those are the amounts that they're budgeting for 2024. And then the next slide is the opposite side, the expenses, as the administration, maintenance, water park, recreation, High Blue, aquatic center, and special events. And I'm definitely not prepared to go through that one-on-one, but I know our Parks Director is here in case you have any questions on any of those.
Well, this is a good time to talk to the park director, right? Because, we've had some issues in the last year, and people ask me about water and making sure the pool's gonna be open. And I guess my question to you guys, are you guys fully staffed for the water areas, for the aquatic center indoors currently and the outdoor?
So currently, we have about 40, right at 40 lifeguards on staff. We'll need to bump that up to about 60, 65 during the outdoor season. The issue is the lifeguard shortages are a national crisis in our business. We've been told by at least 3 or 4 of our managers that they'll be leaving during the outdoor season to go work for the contracted service that we just terminated for $18 an hour. Still trying to figure out what pools those are, but our lifeguards, obviously, for those of you who remember, they faced some pretty tough environmental situations last year, and we just had another pretty serious incident on Saturday. So it's definitely a challenge. We're doing pretty good right now to have 40. We started with 25. And we pretty much have been putting 5 through a training course pretty much every weekend. So, and I know there's another one coming up. So, I guess all I can tell you is we're staffed right now. We have a plan in place, a goal of having 60. So, that answer your question on that?
You did, and that's one of those things that people ask about is making sure, because what happened last year, not just, the outdoor is the big thing, but, of course, I go back. All my friends were lifeguards growing up. I'm not a big water guy, so I didn't care about that. But how do we get high school kids from our community to take on some of these roles in the summertime? I always thought that was what kids did. They wouldn't be lifeguards or, I always thought that was a good job to have.
Well, it definitely has changed. We're competing against a lot of business infrastructure in town that's paying these kids $16 to $18 an hour, and if you remember, COVID had a huge impact on our revenues, and we're still trying to bounce back from it. About $750,000 we were hit in revenues. We've also sustained a $7.85 to $12 an hour minimum wage hike over the last 5 years that has cost us a considerable amount of money. Of course, the cost of goods and services. So. It's definitely it will continue to be a challenge. I wouldn't say it's a turbulent situation for us right now, but you just never know. And just kind of a sidebar, I will share with Joe, who can share with you all I've talked personally with Allison as our liaison, that we've made some very, very significant changes to our policies at the outdoor water park to try and curb some of the issues that we've had out there. Mainly the minimum age that a child can just be dropped off. That's the big one.
That's good. I think having 40 lifeguards right now sounds, you guys just started this in December, so I think that's a large number in my mind.
Yeah. And the other thing that's a challenge is these high school kids, they're athletes, they're in theater, they're in all kinds of things. We've all got kids, and getting them to come to work can be a challenge as well too. So there's a lot of factors in place, but I feel good where we're at right now, and hopefully we'll get to our goal of 60 for the outdoor season.
Thank you.
Any other parks questions or parks related questions? Obviously, they have their own board that pours through this and prepares this, and so. All right.
This is budget.
Here's kind of what I was alluding to earlier is I think that I'm going to request that the council appoint an ad hoc budget redevelopment committee, which could potentially turn into a long-term finance committee, permanent finance committee for our organization. Essentially, I'm looking for like 3 members from the council. It'd be myself, the finance director, assistant finance director, and then we'd probably get a couple other department heads to be included in that. And I'd like us to pore over the entire budget, try to see if we want to redesign it, see how, with the goal in mind that we make it easier to read and understand for anyone who's looking for information. I think that the way our budget is structured right now, it is very difficult to follow. And it takes a lot of time to pour into it and really understand where all the money's going and where it's coming from. And some of that we can't change, but a lot of that we can change, I think, in the way that we present it. And so I think that if we were to go to tackle this and as a committee and bring it back and try to make a recommendation to the rest of the council, we could have something in place well in time for the fiscal year 25 budget. And again, with the goal of increasing transparency and making it easier to understand. So. And obviously, at that point, we'll have our 22 audit done. Hopefully, in the next couple months, we'll have our 23 audit started right away on the tail of that. We can have all that going at the same time, and so we'll essentially know exactly where we've ended up and where we are. We already have we're already close, but it would give us a lot more confidence in that as we're doing that. And here's again. Feedback. Obviously, we've gone through the major highlights for programming and allocations as far as where everything's going, at least the main changes from year over year. I am more than happy to meet with anybody one-on-one, or if you want to meet as a ward one-on-two, to pour through the budget if you'd like. I mean, we can go line by line if you want to. I'm comfortable with doing whatever you guys would. If you're confident that we're going where we need to go, I'm fine with that too. But I just want to offer that, Casey, obviously, and I have really, and each of the staff members for each of their budgets have obviously gone through this pretty heavily, but we are more than welcome, or we're saying you're more than welcome to do the same thing with us there so we can help you understand what's going on specifically in case you have any questions. And I would like to know how, I'm going to be presenting a budget to you guys here pretty soon. I think on the original timeline it said February 14th, but I'm going to push that to February 28th. I'm going to be proposing a budget to you folks, and then we're going to set it up to where we would have any hearings or anything we need to have, and approval. All that can be done in March. But if you guys would like something specifically included in my presentation when I do present my official budget, I'd love to hear it. Any feedback you'd like. And I mean, you want a graph, or you want some comparisons of some certain things, or I mean, now's a good time for me to understand what you're hoping for and what would help you understand this, or what would make it better for people to understand.
Me personally, I mean, we're so late in the game to try to change stuff right now. I mean, I would tell you to run with what we've been doing for the last 30 years. But I would definitely love to see us change it moving forward to have graphs and be easy to read and stuff like that. I just don't know if we have the time frame to do a lot of that stuff between now and April 1 when we have to have this approved.
Well, unless you guys have a lot of recommendations or of changes or anything like that, which you haven't really given me at this point, I have time.
We've never had that opportunity in the past, so
Well,
it's all new to us, so.
The idea is that this is a joint effort, right? To me, the budget is a representation of your values as an organization, as a community, and that's what you guys are in the business of, is representing this organization, this community. So that's what you're elected for. So the feedback's got to come both ways. It's got to be a joint effort to prepare and present this budget to our staff, to the community. So I mean, if there's something that you think is beneficial, I wouldn't just automatically say we're too late in the game to get it for this year. If it's too late, I'll tell you. But I mean, there are things that we can do to help you guys and help the public understand what's going on for this year's budget if we start doing it now.
Well, first of all, I appreciate what you've done tonight. I mean, this is a lot easier to follow than just getting thrown this book and then going through chapter by chapter, which I tried to do, and there's stuff buried in there, and I realize there's not, like Dave said, not enough time to unbury some stuff. But, I mean, the things we're going to get asked, or at least I'm going to get asked, is, hey, we went to these meetings. Not a lot of people went, as a fraction of the whole city, but
Right.
these things should be highlighted. For instance, I really think that in Matt's department, getting a secretary for code enforcement was a great thing, a great addition, and it should be highlighted. I mean, I know it happened last year, but when some of these things happen, or when we're planning them in this next fiscal year, they should be highlighted so that we, without digging through here on page 2735, we can instead say, yes, we are going to look at recycling. We've already looked at tourism. We're going to be, boosting economic development, et cetera, things that are on this list and other things that were on the communities list.
Yeah, and just, that's one reason why I want a communications person on this staff, is to help us to communicate those things as we're doing them, and it'll hopefully help us tie the things that we're doing in our budget to the services and to the requests of the community, if that makes sense. You mentioned recycling. We didn't have anything that's in this necessarily, but obviously we're looking at recycling. We're going to have a workshop on recycling at the next meeting, so we'll have some information that we can pass on for folks as far as what that might cost, depending on if we want to do curbside, that kind of thing. So, yeah, there's lots of stuff that we can do still.
Something I think you've done well, like, for example, with the personnel codes, is helping us compare and contrast how other cities do theirs. If you have time to do an exercise like that with budget presentation, especially online, nobody wants to carry that big book around, but the online presentation mirrors it, and it's hard to interpret that too.
Sure.
So,
that's a tough one in the way you asked that, and I'm not saying it's not a reasonable question or reasonable request, because cities do it differently, right? I mean, a lot of the cities do their thing differently. We've done it differently than the way I've done it this year, the way Casey and I have done it this year, it's different than probably what you guys have done in the past. So everybody does it, everybody does it differently. So as far as comparing and contrasting is kind of a hard thing. One thing that we're going to look into potentially, if we have the money for fiscal year 25, is a budgeting software, because if we had if you get a budgeting software, what you can do is it helps us create a budget book that's more user friendly. They have some really good softwares out there that, as we're doing this exercise of going through the budget, rather than us pouring through Excel spreadsheets and worrying about the Excel spreadsheet, making a mistake in an entry in an Excel spreadsheet, or the Excel spreadsheet becoming corrupted, or all those types of issues that come with just working with the basics. Excel is very powerful, but obviously it's worked for our budget, but there's a lot more we can do with the budget in terms of transparency and what we can present to people with some of the software out there that doesn't take a lot of manpower. It naturally does it if we just input it in that software.
well, and a transition like that would comb through and look for any calculation errors or things that have bit us in the past.
That's one of the big reasons why I'm a proponent of budgeting software, because yes, when you're doing an Excel spreadsheet, yeah, it's real easy for someone to make a mistake, and it's hard for us to track it sometimes.
Good, Brett.
So you were talking about comparing and contrasting. So, and maybe this is just me, I would like to be able to see, whatever it was, a month ago, 2 months ago, you had this wish list. I'd like to see actual list.
Okay.
Compare what was taken off of the wish list capital and what's being asked to stay in the capital.
Okay. That wouldn't be very difficult to do.
Thank you.
I was just going to piggyback on Councilwoman Lawson's. I probably said it like 3 or 4 years here that community to the east of us, their budget's fairly easy to read, and it kind of spells out what wastewater is and who's involved and the different departments in it. So when I look at other communities' budgets, it's easier for the community read. We're all community members, and when you get on this thing, our budget is very difficult to read. And I told you, and Perry probably can concur this, that Ron Trivet, I bet we did 10 budget meetings.
Right.
We went line by line, and he made sure that you understood that budget. The revenue's coming in, the expenditure's going out.
Right.
But I think Ron Trivet made sure that we understood where that money went, so we So I understand the budget on that Excel spreadsheet a lot better than most just because of Mr. Trivet.
Understood.
And I had to go back and restudy it and try to remember from 20 years ago, like, okay. But I just, I think when you look at some of the other communities, just reading their budget it's a lot easier for the common person and our citizens to read it a lot easier, in my opinion.
Absolutely. That's a goal. And there, to me, that's two steps. One is I think we need to simplify our budget and our process. And I mean, I think the process we kind of simplified this year, but we need to simplify the actual structure of the budget and accounting for where the money comes in and where it goes. And I think that can be, there's a lot of room for improvement there that Casey and I have already been like, okay, we're not doing this again. We need to change this. So that's why I want to rely on you guys to help us with that ad hoc committee to do that as the first step. And then, of course, how we prepare it and present it to the public. I mean, you guys are living this because you guys, you're part of what we do every month, right? The general public isn't. So I want something that people can pull up, and if they just have a basic understanding of anything budget related, if they've ever looked at a budget before, I want them to be able to look at our budget and understand what's going on.
Well, I mean, sometimes you'll have someone get online, and Mayor probably concur with this, they'll look at our fund balances that I think Stephanie puts out for us and not actually at the budget. And I mean, to me, those are two different items.
Right.
Right. But yeah, I mean, we sat there and argued, I think, one time on Facebook, which, is a great place to argue, about the money coming in, money coming out, and how much money we actually have. And it's very difficult for people to understand all that stuff. But when you try to take them back to the budget and show them where all that is laid out, our budget's not very easy for these people to go see that.
Especially when they're taking a snapshot in time and
Right.
it doesn't reflect
Well,
the budget. They're just looking at one day.
Right, and yeah, and I think that we need to look at how we're doing all of our capital projects and how we're accounting for all that. I think that there's ways that we can present this that show, okay, here's the percentage of of the money that we get going to this, here's a percentage going to that. Those are the types of things that we can do that would be a lot easier for people to
But see, when
understand.
you talk about putting wording on that, you can sit there and say, in 2019, the citizens of Belton voted in a stormwater levy and a street levy, and here's where this money is going, and here's what we've done so far. And I think it's just sometimes about communicating with them and where their money that they voted in and where it's going, and they can see that.
I think it's vital that we do that.
Like I said, I don't think we can do it this year, but I think as we're
Start doing- we
talking,
can
I
do
think
some
it's
of
a
it.
goal.
We can do some of it. So, yeah, I think that's definitely the goal. We definitely want to be able to tie in what the community has done and voted for and where that goes and how that plays in. And I think a lot of people don't realize, there's two ends of the spectrum. Some people think, well, we all this extra money that we don't even need, and where's it all going? Or, all I know is I'm getting taxed too much, or all I know what it costs me, and I get that, I understand that. And then you got the folks who, I want what I want. And so, I mean, trying to be able to communicate in a way that everybody can understand, well, here's where it goes, and here's, that's why we have these meetings, that's why we have these conversations, is where we're deciding the little things that we're tweaking to make sure that we're representing our community.
But I think you want to do a vision, what I call a vision for our community with members and all that. I mean, we've always, in the beginning of our budget book, has always talked about the goals of the community and what the citizens have expressed to us that they wanted. And, for years, it could be sidewalks, it could be recycling, it could be all this stuff that community members have wanted other than a Chick-fil-A or an Olive Garden, which, I mean, that's economic development's job to do. But I just think putting that stuff in there where they read it,
Yeah.
and they see that, hey, we did a study, or we had a vision meeting, and, we had 100 participants come and do this over 3 months, and here's what came out of it. I think putting that out there, that it's not coming from the 9 of us or from the department heads and all that other stuff, but it's coming from the actual other community members that are saying this is what we want or what we need.
A good budget book will explain the process that you underwent and
Right.
the impact, the opportunities for feedback and who participated in that and how that worked. So, yeah, absolutely.
Any other budget questions?
Obviously, I can talk about this all night if you want, but this is everything on the presentation, so.
That gets us started.
I think, we got about a month. I don't want us to take a month. If you guys have concerns or issues, please bring them up to me. I know it's a lot to digest right now. I've printed off the worksheet. If you want to go through line by line, please reach out to me. We'll get that done. We might want to do that sooner than later if you do want to do that. And we'll.
Well, I always remind people that budget is always a moving target too. I mean, we can always adjust it and move stuff around if we see that need in the future, because it's our budget. I mean, it's our budget. The 9 of us, we say yes to it. They put it together and we say yes with.
That's right.
But yeah,
Yeah, I'd say that this is probably, I mean, this and picking a city manager is your guys' top responsibilities as the elected officials, is where's our money going and who's leading us.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. City Council liaison reports.
Parks has the formerly daddy-daughter dance is now the family dance at High Blue on the 18th of February coming up. The Easter egg hunt is scheduled for April 1st, and that is a sight to behold. The turnout on that is massive. Really well run last year. We enjoyed it. So if you want to see a bunch of kids run around screaming for candy, April 1st. Summerfest is scheduled for June 3rd. Right now there is a full-time projects and facilities manager position open, and the Memorial Park Playground is set to reopen in April.
Any questions? Anybody else? Go ahead, Ron.
Well, I got 3 things. One might kind of bleed into councilman reports. But anyway, the TDD, Transportation Development District, met on January 18th, and then that's about widening Mullen Road. They approved $768,000 for Osage Valley Utility to move their power lines. All the property owners have agreed to settlements for their property near the proposed circle at Cambridge and Mullen. Last meeting I said they're going to start in summer, but now it's fall 2023. And part of that, I think a little bit of it is that there's been a hitch in plans. The bank they were getting their funding from, Great Western Bank, was taken over by First Interstate Bank, and that bank nixed the bonds up to $9 million for the project. So they're looking for new funding. I'm not a finance person. It seems late in the game to me, but that they seem confident they'll get funding. Anyway, Piper Jaffray, the TDD's financial services company, is in the process of finding new funding, and one of their possible ideas in their quirky dot presentation was city funding, which is timely because we're coming up with a budget. But anyway, they haven't come to the city, I don't think, to ask for money yet. This is kind of an offshoot. Codes Enforcement Advisory Council, we haven't had a meeting since our December meeting, but Matt and Joe and our, I guess it was Human Resources person, were at the a meeting to January 19th about the rental inspection program. Most of you were there, so I'm not going to repeat all the stuff, but seems there were a lot of landlords there who weren't too thrilled with the program. They cited Fourth Amendment rights against unwarranted searches. They call for homeowner inspections to parallel rental inspections. And the bottom line now is the program's being tweaked by the staff based on the citizen input and landlord input, or there may be both. They may be both at the same time. And will be submitted to the Codes Enforcement Advisory Committee in February. And then I wanted to talk about one other thing, has nothing to do with the liaison, but I mentioned a few of you, and I didn't get a chance because we didn't have a meeting last week to mention it last week, but there was the Cass County, actually it's a U.S. point-in-time homeless count last Wednesday night from 4 p.m. to 2 p.m. the next afternoon. So for several hours, I lasted for about 6 hours, we went out into the woods, went to places where we expected to find homeless. It was a little bit warmer than last year. It was 19 degrees this year. And we won't have data for 2022 yet. They haven't counted up the whole group, but we have about 25 unsheltered homeless in the Belton Raymore area. And a curious thing I saw about the data was across Missouri, there's one unsheltered person for every 2 sheltered people. Sheltered means they found a church basement to camp in, or they're staying with a relative maybe one night a week or something, as opposed to unsheltered, meaning they're out in the elements. But in our region, we have 3.5 unsheltered for every 1 sheltered, which implies to me we have a lot fewer shelters in this area than the rest of Missouri. And I could see from the way that people are living, and most of our homeless are, in their own words, are there because of mental illness or substance abuse. And I guess the final thing that I would bring from that is, I was amazed at the commitment from the volunteers that were out there looking for people. And so I think when we do get a homeless committee, we will have a lot of volunteers from the community to be on that. In fact, there were people there from Ward 1, 2, and 4 just the other night at 10, 11 o'clock at night, looking for people in the woods. So that's it.
I have a question for Rob, actually.
Go ahead.
Your TDD, are they still planning on doing Mullen from
The railroad.
Railroad
To
to
the-
Cambridge?
Cambridge, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
There are four lanes
Right.
to that point.
Mayor, I will continue to ask that we put together a homeless committee to begin this, even though it's a regional issue. Unless someone can point out to me, has any of us been invited to this regional meeting? We need to
I don't
leave.
know that there's per se a regional meeting. I know there's a meeting.
We need to lead
Can't
it.
even think the name.
I know that
of the group.
Mark did a study, and I haven't seen the results of that study. They should already be out. I'm actually meeting with the Grandview City Administrator next week, so I'll talk to him about it then. But I know Mark was doing a study on homelessness, and it was an in-depth study that was going to include recommendations and action plans, and it included a lot of Jackson County communities, but their neighboring communities essentially. And so it was specifically set up for four specific communities in Jackson County. But because it's a regional issue, we can take what they've learned and what they are recommending and bring it back here and say, okay, well, what makes sense for us as well. And obviously, I don't have any. I've never had any problem with creating a committee of community members who are interested if they want to participate and tackle an issue. Right? I've already presented to 5 or 6 committees since I started here, and so I would welcome another one if we wanted to.
Go ahead.
Is there any update on grant proposals, grant writing for a social worker to join our staff? I know that kind of landed across a couple different departments potentially, but just seeing if that has gone anywhere.
As far as grants, I don't believe we have anything like that in the works at this point yet. I don't know.
No, we haven't come across any grants. We have been working with the crisis access point that's over in Raymore right now in regards to resources for homeless and Compass Mental Health. We are investigating. There's a police officer program in Independence in Kansas City in regards to officers that engage with homeless. And we're trying to find out more about those programs.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any communication?
Are we on communications?
Yeah.
I didn't know if we were doing,
I think we're done with liaison reports.
Yeah.
You're
Well, I got the feeling for the mayor, I think that's what happened. He had a meeting to go to, but it was my pleasure with Andrew Cunningham, Joe, and Madison Smith. We got to go do a chili tasting contest with the city employees. Now, Public Works, I didn't get to come to your facility. Nobody participated or heard something about a monthly dinner going on, but could have been chili invited us 4 over there to sample, but 19 different samples across 6, 7 different departments. I will let you know my favorite was still the golf courses. One of the part-time employees out there made a nice chili that I liked. The overall winner, I think, was Mary Jones. The police chief somehow won his contest out there too. So I mean, but It was a fun day. I got to go out and see all the different departments as a city council person and interact with the employees, and I enjoy that. I think 19 different chilies, and we ate a lot. I don't think I need chili for a while, but it was a fun day dealing with the citizen or the employees, and I think they had an engagement day is what they call that, so that was a fun day for us.
Go ahead.
I didn't mention this earlier when we passed our resolution because I needed to check my dates, but yesterday there was a resolution presented to the Jackson County Legislature in opposition to the landfill location. So something positive in terms of Jackson County or Kansas City Mo's response. And then the second thing for council communications, I didn't want to say this during the parks update because I don't think this is a reflection of parks, but some of the issues our lifeguards have faced and some of the reasons folks don't want to come do this job is patron behavior. And Saturday's incident, which I've just gotten some more details about, is really discouraging. So I just felt like speaking that out here now that if you're going to go and use our facilities, you're going to follow our rules, you're going to be, a pleasant neighborly presence, or we're going to continue having these issues. And it is really discouraging and disheartening to parks staff in particular to keep facing these patron issues. So just wanted to say that.
I think you'll find that in anybody that deals with what I call customer service. I don't care if it's with the city. I mean, our water department people deal with that every Thursday. From what I'm being told, it's just the rude behavior and the language and stuff like that. I mean, they shouldn't put up with it. I don't think anybody should put up with it. I just think, people should, you could be mad all you want, but if there's different ways of going about making sure people's concerns are being heard.
What?
Brian has something to say.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
You got to keep in mind too, a 15 and a 16-year-old kid trying to enforce a rule to a 30, 40, or 50-year-old makes it very, very difficult. And so our main focus is just trying to manage what we can control and try to prepare for what we can assume may or may not happen again, and that's kind of our approach.
Anybody else? You two up there in Zoom land got anything?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Hold on.
Oh, we got to do that other thing, don't we?
Only thing I have, what Dave said, I'll put him in charge of the chili because I had an opportunity to go to a meet and greet and tour at the Honeywell plant on last Friday. And it was pretty informative, talking about how they want to try to do this more often and try to get the communities more involved in what they're doing. And they actually showed a bunch of products and stuff. They had stuff set up. It was kind of neat about what they do and how they're trying to change how they do processes to make them faster and cheaper. And it was pretty informative. The guy that's running Honeywell, he's a younger kid, and he was pretty down to earth and just wanted to get the community more involved than what it's been in the past, because it's always been everybody knows what they do at Honeywell, but he wanted to make sure that we knew what they do at Honeywell. So it was a good 3 or 4 hours I spent there. So sorry I didn't get the chili cook-off. So that's all I have. City manager, you got anything?
Just a couple quick things. Councilman Powell had mentioned the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee. I believe they're working on getting their next meeting organized for February. So I'd expect us to have a meeting in February because staff does have something to take to them regarding the rental inspection program. Tourism Council met for the first time, and that was a positive meeting in the right direction. And Public Arts Commission that you guys approved last meeting, we're obviously taking applications for the Public Arts Commission now. So there are 4 seats, 1 for each ward, and then there's 2 at-large seats open. So if you are interested, anybody out there listening or watching, please, we'd love to have arts-minded folks on this commission.
Anybody else? With that, I entertain a motion to enter an executive session, discuss matters pertaining to legal actions according to Missouri State Statute 610.021.1, and discuss matters pertaining to negotiated contracts according to Missouri State Statute 610.021.12, and that the record be closed and the meeting adjourned from there.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Lawson. Goff.
Aye.
Powell.
Yes.
Richardson.
Aye.
Pryan.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kraft.
Aye.
White.
Aye.
Mayor Larkey.
Aye. Motion approved.